Well, would you look at the size of those fireworks? Here's your spooky spot in NECA Toys Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, Red, Fright, and Boo. The devilishly delightful Cassandra Peterson has played the part of Elvira for more than 40 years with grace, humor, and more than a little camp. NECA is proud to present this positively patriotic figure of the Mistress of the Dark in a sparkling red dress for your horror collection. The 8-inch Elvira action figure is fully articulated with features tailored fabric clothing, plus plenty of accessories, alternate winking head, skull and snake candle holder, chalice, and figure stand. Oh, now I know who Chris Dǝvᴜous was writing about when he wrote the song Lady in Red. Before we get a closer look, though, at Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, Red, Fright, and Boo, I'd like to first thank the folks over at NECA Toys that did provide the sample we could have a look at. This isn't, by the way, simply just an excuse for them to use the mold. Again, I'd be twisting my rubber arm to get another version of Elvira. But in fact, to be fair, Elvira wore a red dress through various different promotions and also conventions she circulated around to. You can, in fact, actually look up Red Dress Elvira and find actually older posters and photography that she did, one in which that she's actually doing a salute in front of the American flag. We're going to also bring in that earlier Elvira that we did look at here on this channel, so don't worry, some comparisons will be underway. But also as well, let's grab the tape measure and see how tall the figure stands. With beehive intact, Elvira is actually standing about 8 3/4 of an inch in height, or the figure's 21.5 centimeters tall. Yeah, so we did actually get this Elvira before. I'm just going to bring in the one that we had looked at earlier. Now, while you may be looking at that and thinking, well, they're using a completely different head sculpt, that Elvira as well, like the red one that we're about to have a look at, came with 2 alternate head sculpts. I just so happen to be displaying the one on the shelf with the winking eye, but that may very well change that we have the red version here as well. Now, while also looking at this figure, it did draw also one conclusion I had. I'm going to bring in now Stevie Wayne. This was actually the retro cloth one released from the Fog as a Scream Factory exclusive. And I knew I recognized that neckline from before. It is, in fact, it seems to be the case that they are using the same bodies, which would also then explain why Stevie Wayne was also taller than the Jamie Lee Curtis Laurie Strode retro cloth figure that we used for the comparisons of that figure. Don't be too alarmed by the terrifying trinkets that come included with this Elvira, as in fact they are the same ones that got already packed with the black-clad Elvira. Let's look at those accessories individually. First of all, she comes included with a very tiny dagger. So tiny it would fall into that category of easily lost if you're not too careful. So happens to be, let's bring in the dagger that we got from earlier Elvira. It looks to be also the same handle, although this one, for the red version, does seem to have a more notably shinier handle. The blades, it seems to be, if I can actually hold on to these, they're so tiny. The blades, again, are very similar with one another. So, like, again, if you wanted to use, for example, any one of these accessories with the earlier Elvira, you could very well do that. Dagger, more importantly, because like the Elvira from before, I'm just going to bring this one in right now, there was actually a notable slot here on the front of her belt where you could take then the dagger and slide it into the loop. It was always one thing that was very hard to do. You had to be very careful to kind of feed the knife through there without ripping the loop in the process. The thing about it, though, with the new Elvira is while she still has the belt, she has now gone away completely. She doesn't have the little loop anymore, the little loop there on the front. So there's really no way to display the dagger unless you want to have it in the figure's hands. Speaking actually, by the way, bring back in Elvira right now. Both the figures also come included with display stands. The one they had for the black version of Elvira actually was just a regular black circular display stand, still had the peg, because the figures were still fine to stand on their own, but with the amount of footprint space allotted to these figures, she was a little harder to kind of stand on her own, so of course they included a display stand. This version of Elvira, before we kind of jump to the rest of the accessories, also comes included with a display stand, but this one notably is not only shinier, but it also has the signature of Elvira on the top. I think that's a nice little touch. So again, like if you wanted to have this displayed, for example, with this version of Elvira, like the foot hole pegs, being that they're exactly the same molds after all. Well, actually, you know, looking at it, maybe the holes are just slightly bigger on the black version, but I'm sure you probably could. Let's just take that right now and take that as a test. Will that fit on the figure's feet? Yeah, it will. It will. I think it's probably just the case also that I was using already the figure on this display stand. where I really haven't used as many of the, well, I haven't doweled the footholes that much really with the peg holes already. So yeah, again, if you want to use this version of the display stand with the red dress version of Elvira, yeah, by all means, you could certainly do that as well. Might just end up doing that. I like the signature kind of thing with the black dress Elvira. The whole thing while I was actually talking away, though, was the fact that there is no section on the figure's belt, for example. Just to look at the figure's front of the belt, she's missing the little loop, and there's nothing really on the back either. So there isn't a place like the black version of Elvira where you can actually store the dagger. It'll either have to be in her hand. Well, that's the only option you have available. It only has to be in her hand. The other thing, actually, while we have both Elviras here, the figure also comes included with a little chalice. Now, the chalice also came packed along with the black dress version of Elvira. And you can see, like, the chalices, if you were to look at them, they're exactly the same, at least from a mold. You can see, like, the jewels this time around, they're red on the top and red on the bottom. Whereas this one, actually, the original one, was red on the top where the skull eyes would be. And then down below, they were actually green stones. And wafting out the top, instead of actually having a green smoke, this actually now, with the newer one, has a red smoke. Still like the green smoke myself. And again, like if you wanted to, you could swap them around. No one's really specifically saying that you have to keep this chalice with this Elvira and keep this one with this Elvira. Lastly, the figure also comes included with a candle. Not the nicest candles to be giving away to get somebody as a gift, but just to bring back in the original one, they seem to be more exactly the same, unlike the chalice. The hairs, I think, are a little bit more of a darker gray on the original version. The newer one seems to have notably more of a lighter coloring of the hairs. But I think other than that, the skulls are very much identical to one another. Just a little bit lighter. That's all really this is different from this one. Just a little bit lighter. And then, of course, the figures do also, both of them, actually had the swappable head sculpt. Now, already looking at the fact I did take the time to swap the head sculpt out with this one, because the original Elvira would have had, again, like both versions of them. So this version of Elvira, I'm just going to pick the figure up and show you guys the difference between the two. One thing that actually is different, as you can already see, is the fact that even though the faces are sculpted the same, the eyes on this one are actually looking forward, whereas this one, the eyes are looking upward. So I suppose there's enough change between the two that's not, well, obviously it's the same sculpting, but if, for example, you didn't like the idea of having Elvira with her eyes looking up, for example, you could then really use the one that actually came included with the black dress Elvira, with the eyes looking forward. As for the alternate head sculpt, which again, just to get her stand here for a second, the other alternate head sculpt was that of her winking. You can see that right there. And just to pick up the Elvira that we had already had a look at, yeah, it looks to be very much identical to one another. What I might just end up doing is maybe using the blinking eye, one eye blinking, at least for the one that has the red dress, and maybe then keeping the stock head sculpt, which would be this head sculpt, on the regular version of Elvira. Swapping out the heads, by the way, are super easy. You're just simply going to grab onto the figure's body as best of a place that you can find to hold on to. And then you're just going to kind of wiggle the head off the post. It's a little harder, I noticed, with this figure. Kind of have to really hold on. I'm going to just put the other alternate head sculpt down. There we go. Pop that off. And again, if you wanted to replace it then, just get the hair around her dress. Pop that back into place. There we go. If you're having, by the way, any tough time, as I'm kind of struggling a little bit to get the head back in place. If you're having any bit of a hard time, you can also just heat this up in hot water, or you can also use the hairdryer trick. The hairdryer trick just really involves running a few passes with the hairdryer. I had done this earlier, but maybe the peg had softened up just a little bit. What I might just end up doing is popping the head back in place. I might just change that up later, a little bit later when we actually get back to final looks of the figure there, and then just put it back the way it was. So let's just go ahead and remove the stands for right now. I'm going to go ahead and remove the stand for right now that came include the original Elvira. And then looking at the difference between the two, obviously overlooking the fact that, well, on this one, it would have been the defaulted head, and this one has the winking eyes. But other than that, like the head sculpts are going to be exactly the same. Both have the beehives, for example. I mean, obviously this is a, would it make more sense? All right. We'll pop this head off. We'll pop this head off. There we go. There we go. And we'll replace it with the alternate head sculpt. Or I guess really the figure may have started with this head. Popping this in place. There we go. All right. That way at least we're apples to apples. Looking at the two head sculpts again, like the only real difference you can really see between the two is the fact that this has the eyes now looking forward. This has the eyes looking up. It's personal preference really for you as to which way you'd like to have the figure displayed. Dress-wise, they're exactly the same, other than really the fact that one just has a regular black dress. This one now has sort of more of a glitterish red dress. The belts are a little bit different, as already mentioned, by the fact that this one had the loop already for storing the dagger. This one doesn't unfortunately have the loop, but it looks to be the case that they're using probably the same pattern when it came to actually tailoring, cutting out the fabric, stitching this all together. Essentially, we're getting the exact same dress, just presented 2 different ways. The leggings are also something, when we just kind of moved the dress away for Elvira. The original one kind of had more like stockings that she would have wore, whereas this version of Elvira actually seems to be having just bare legs. The heels are also, the shoes that I should say, are exactly the same also as well. The only difference is that these are the black shoes, these are the red shoes. And again, they plug in exactly the same way. For the figure's articulation, being the fact it is also the exact same figure, it's also going to share the exact same articulation. So it does rotate back and forth. Obviously, there's only so much mileage you can do with the fact that the hair, as long as it may be from the front and as equally long as it is on the back, there's only so much you can actually really rotate the head. You can move it back and forth fine and good. Moving it up and down is probably the easier than moving it up. But there's a little bit more limitations just by the way that she's constructed. Also, as well, the figure does have an upper torso ball joint. I'm sorry, Elvira in advance. Upper torso that allows the joint, the torso, to rotate all the way around. Arms come out at easily 90 degrees. You just kind of have to be careful of getting around the hair, but they move out 90 degrees. Same with the original Elvira. You can move the arms forward. You can move the arms back. There is a swivel at the bicep. There is a double hinge on the elbow, and the hands do rotate all the way around. As for the legs do split out. You can obviously bring them forward. You can bring them back. There's a swivel at the top of the thigh. Only a single hinge again on the knee. And again, like the articulation still in the ankle that moves up and down this way. And you can also rock it back and forth this way as well. Trying to make everything a little bit more decent. I'm sorry, Elvira. Let's go ahead and get the figures once again on their display stands. Now, I guess because we did start the review properly with the accessories that came included with the red, white, and blue version of Elvira, let's go ahead and get her back onto that display stand. And then we can go ahead and bring back in the black dress version of Elvira. And we'll go ahead and get her onto that display stand. With the benefit really now being provided of having 2 alternate head sculpts, you can now really then display Elvira with, well, 2 completely different expressions. The thing about it, though, is honestly with both of the cases of Elvira, I think I like the winking eye, I think, the most out of both of them. But then that would certainly ultimately result in having the figures displayed with, again, the exact same head sculpts. Maybe, again, what I might just end up doing is have the figure... Yeah, you know what I might just end up doing? I'm talking to myself right now about this. I might just keep the black dress version of Elvira with the winking eye, because that's my favorite of the 2, and that's kind of more the definitive look for Elvira, for at least for me. And I think for this version of Elvira, it had nothing also to do with the fact I struggled a little bit getting the swapped out head sculpt in place, but I might end up just displaying her with the regular eyes. Now, the question, though, is with the head sculpts being different as they are, the other alternate head sculpt, which I guess would be now this one, with the eyes looking up, it's, again, what you can always really do is then swap the head sculpts around. If you don't really necessarily like the eyes looking up as high as they are in this version, simply then just use the alternate head sculpt that if you may not be using it already with the other Elvira. The ball joints are exactly the same. The bodies are exactly the same. So you can mix and match and move the parts around as you see fit. Now, packed inside the red Fright and Boo version of Elvira, there's actually a little insert card that actually has fireworks. A good way of also displaying it with the figure, you simply would just take it out of the packaging if you're not using it anyways, and just have it displayed behind the figure. Personally, I would have loved if they could have inserted an American flag, simply just because, again, like when we've seen images, when you look up images of red dress Elvira, seriously, look it up when you get the chance. There's a lot of images. In fact, actually, she's doing sort of the salute like I've got right now with the American flag behind her. I might maybe just see if I can find a serviceable replacement of an American flag just to have displayed behind my Elvira. I do like, again, like the fact that the figure does have still carried over the 2 swapped out heads. So simply, again, even though the outfit is one thing that obviously tells the difference between the 2 figures, but you can also go further from that and change out the head sculpts so you can have one winking eye on one and one regular eye open on the other. It's kind of odd, though, the fact that with the opened eye version head sculpts, that one does have notably the eyes looking up and the other one had the eyes looking forward. So I guess there's a little bit of variance between those 2 as well, so you can choose which ones you like to use. And being, of course, they are using all the same pegs and all the same body parts, simply just swap out the head sculpts on the Elviras till you have the look that you want. What do you guys think, though, of Red, Fright, and Boo version of Elvira? Is this a figure you could see yourselves picking up? Or have you already picked up the other Elvira? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Once again, a ghoulish thank you to the folks over at NECA Toys that did provide the sample of Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, Red, Fright, and Boo. Even though technically I would imagine that this falls more into the category of 4th of July, being the fact it does have boo in the name of the packaging, we're going to categorize this into a spooky spot. That's what we're going to do. Also as well, if you guys enjoyed this video, want to hit with a like. If you guys are enjoying the content you're seeing and would like to certainly stick around for more spooky spots, sorry for spitting on everybody, make sure if you haven't already done so that you hit that subscribe button down below and you're turning on the bell notification. Going to be more spookerific reviews coming your way. So as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.